Welcome to another episode of PPL Pod.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, this is going to be a fascinating deep dive. So, imagine telling a teenage girl who's just singing backup in this dusty Anaheim garage band that one day she'd be a global fashion mogul, a country music superstar, and at the center of a massive cultural firestorm.
Right, specifically because of a single interview where she looked at a reporter and said, "My God, I'm Japanese."
Exactly. Despite being strictly of Irish and Italian descent. So today, we're unpacking the wildly complex career of Gwen Stefani.
It's quite the journey.
It really is. And the reason this story matters to you, whether you're a massive pop fan or just someone who's, fascinated by culture, is because her 30-plus year career isn't just this simple timeline of hit songs.
No, not at all.
It's actually a masterclass in how intensely personal heartbreak and this massive cultural fascination can literally build an empire.
Yeah, but it's also a story that forces us to examine the increasingly complicated, very blurry line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because it's kind of like watching someone accidentally build a rocket ship in their parents' garage and then having to figure out how to fly it while the whole world is just watching them.
That is the perfect analogy. You have this artist who built an entire legacy on raw, deeply personal confession, yet her public persona is tangled up in these heavy, highly curated, and often controversial layers of cultural borrowing.
Yeah.
To really understand how this happened, we have to go back to the environment that shaped her.
Right. Setting the scene.
Exactly. So we're looking at the late 1980s and early 1990s. Gwen Renee Stefani, born in 1969, and, fun fact, she was actually named after a stewardess from the 1968 novel Airport.
Wait, really? A stewardess from a novel?
Yeah, completely random, but kind of amazing. Anyway, she's just a Catholic kid growing up in Anaheim, California. Her parents are listening to traditional folk music, but it's her older brother, Eric, who introduces her to the sound that changes everything.
Which was ska, right?
Yep, specifically two-tone ska music, like bands from the UK, such as Madness.
And this is where the whole garage band thing comes in. Eric decides to form a ska band called Applecore, which, eventually evolves into No Doubt.
Right.
But here is the thing that people always forget about those early days. Gwen was not the star.
Not at all.
She was just providing backing vocals. She was essentially just the reluctant younger sister hanging out in the background, while their lead singer, a guy named John Spence, fronted the group.
But then, in 1987, the band suffers an unimaginable tragedy.
Yeah.
John Spence takes his own life.
It's just devastating.
It really is. And this tragic event unexpectedly thrusts Gwen right to the front of the stage. She becomes the sole lead singer.
Wow.
And what's fascinating here is how Spence's tragic death fundamentally altered her trajectory. She didn't aggressively seek out the spotlight.
Right, she was kind of pushed into it.
Exactly, pushed by necessity, by loyalty to her brother, and by profound grief.
And when you look at the musical landscape they were stepping into right after that, it's pretty harsh.
Oh, totally hostile. The early 90s were not kind to upbeat, brass-heavy ska music.
No, because grunge was completely dominating the culture.
Right.
You had this aggressive, deeply apathetic, angsty posturing from bands in the Pacific Northwest. And that was the only thing the industry cared about.
So when No Doubt released their self-titled ska pop debut in 1992, it was just a massive commercial failure. The market simply wasn't interested in peppy dance music.
But instead of trying to pivot and sound like Nirvana, Gwen totally rejects that whole aggressive grunge trend.
Which was a huge risk.
Huge. She didn't want to be this angry, tough, flannel-wearing frontwoman. Instead, she looks up to Debbie Harry of Blondie.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. She admired how Debbie blended power and sex appeal without losing an ounce of her femininity.
Yeah, she realized you didn't have to act like one of the guys to command a room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what seemed like a massive weakness in 1992, her absolute refusal to conform to the dominant grunge trend ultimately becomes the very thing that makes her stand out.
Right, and it perfectly set the stage for the explosion of their album Tragic Kingdom in 1995.
Which was just monstrously huge.
Oh, massive. Now, this album took more than 3 years to make, and it went on to sell over 16 million copies worldwide.
Wow.
But the fuel for that album, the actual mechanism that made it resonate with millions of people, wasn't just, musical ambition. It was profound personal devastation.
The personal drama fueling this music is honestly just wild. Gwen was intensely, deeply invested in her relationship with No Doubt's bass player, Tony Kanal.
Very invested.
Yeah, she actually later admitted in an interview that all she did was look at Tony and pray to God that he would let her have a baby with him.
Wow.
I mean, she was entirely consumed by this relationship. But then Kanal ends it.
Which nearly destroys the band.
Yeah, almost broke him up completely. But instead, that devastation becomes the raw material for massive generational hits like Don't Speak and Sunday Morning.
The band was essentially processing their trauma on global radio. I mean, the audience could feel that the tension wasn't manufactured.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Just put yourself in her shoes for a second.
Okay.
You go through a devastating, life-altering breakup. Normally, you want space, right? You want to avoid your ex at all costs.
Of course.
Now, imagine having to step onto a stage every single night under blaring lights and sing your most agonizing confessional diary entries about that exact breakup.
Well, with the exact guy who broke your heart standing right there.
Yes, standing 4 feet behind you, playing the bass line.
Right.
The sheer psychological awkwardness and tension of that situation is mind-boggling.
It's incredibly raw, and it's during this specific era of vulnerability that her iconic public image really begins to form.
Right.
But notice how it forms. It's heavily influenced by absorbing the things immediately around her. She started wearing a bundi on her forehead, which was directly inspired by attending family gatherings with Kanal, who is of Indian heritage.
Oh.
Yeah. She adopted the striking platinum blonde hair, which was inspired by her fascination with old Hollywood actress Jean Harlow. And of course, she started wearing her signature midriff-bearing tops.
Which she actually made herself.
Really?
Yeah, she was literally hand-stitching these stage outfits, piecing together this highly unique visual identity while singing her literal diary entries to millions of people.
That's incredible, but as she grows out of that era, things shift dramatically. By 2004, No Doubt is officially on hiatus, and Gwen makes a massive, highly calculated pivot.
The solo era.
Exactly. She releases her debut solo album, Love Angel Music Baby, or L.A.M.B for short.
Okay, so what was the thinking behind L.A.M.B?
Her motivation here was highly specific and deeply strategic. She wanted to modernize the 1980s music she loved in high school.
So, like, who are we talking about?
Artists like The Cure, Club Nouveau, early Madonna. It was a complete sonic departure from the ska punk world.
Right.
If you look at the mechanics of the lead single, what you waiting for? She literally spells out her internal anxieties. She sings about her fears of leaving No Doubt for a solo career, her writer's block, and her ticking biological clock regarding her desire to have a baby.
Wow, she just put it all out there.
Yeah, she co-wrote it with Linda Perry, and it's essentially this anxious internal monologue set to a massive dance beat.
And it led to historic success. I mean, we have to talk about Hollaback Girl.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just a hit. It was a structural shift in how we consumed music. Hollaback Girl became the very first digital download in the U.S. to ever sell over 1 million copies.
That's a huge milestone.
We are talking about the dawn of the iTunes era, and she is at the absolute forefront.
And if we look at how she did it, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
She didn't just make a typical rock song. She took a brass-driven marching band aesthetic and layered it over a modern hip-hop beat.
Yeah, it was so unique.
Then you have the track Rich Girl, where she brings in rapper Eves and producer Dr. Dre. They loosely base the entire track on the song If I Were a Rich Man from the mid-century Broadway musical Fiddler on the Roof.
Which is just a crazy combination if you think about it.
It is. She's pulling from 1980s new wave, 2000s club beats, and Broadway all at once.
So what does this all mean for her career trajectory? Like, how does this fit into the bigger picture?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this was a highly unusual career move for a rock frontwoman at the time.
How so?
Usually, when the lead singer of a rock band goes solo, they try to prove their quote-unquote artistic depth with a very serious, stripped-down acoustic record.
Oh, right. Like the serious singer-songwriter pivot.
Exactly. But Gwen completely inverted that expectation. She unabashedly leaned into fun, club-ready pop, electro, and high-fashion name-dropping.
Oh, yeah, she's singing about designers like John Galliano and Vivienne Westwood.
Right. She completely redefined the parameters of what a female rock star could do.
She didn't just redefine it, she monetized it into a literal aesthetic empire.
Absolutely.
That solo album launched the L.A.M.B clothing line and eventually the Harajuku Lovers line. It started with clothes, but eventually she was rolling out an avalanche of products.
Oh, everything.
Yeah, everything from dolls to perfumes to, like, camera accessories.
And we absolutely cannot talk about the Harajuku lovers line without talking about the Harajuku girls.
Right. This is where it gets complicated.
Yes. This was a curated entourage of 4 Japanese dancers named Love, Angel, Music, and Baby. They were dressed in gothic Lolita fashion, directly inspired by the street style around the Harajuku station in Tokyo.
And they were everywhere.
They followed Gwen everywhere. They were in her music videos, silent on her press tours, and featured right there on the album cover.
Okay, wait, let's pause here.
Yeah.
Because looking back at that today, she was openly taking a highly specific Japanese subculture, employing silent dancers as essentially human props, and using the entire aesthetic to sell her own merchandise.
Yep.
How did people not immediately call foul on that in 2004?
It's a great question, and it really highlights the cultural shift between then and now. In 2004, the cultural landscape was very different. We were in the peak MTV era, where globalization of fashion was celebrated as edgy and cosmopolitan.
Right, and no Twitter.
Exactly. We didn't have the immediate democratized feedback loop of social media.
Hmm.
The public largely viewed it as a massive visual and financial success.
And it was undeniably lucrative. I mean, between 2007 and 2008, Forbes listed her as the 10th highest paid music personality in the entire world, pulling in $27 million.
Which is staggering.
But this is the central tension of her career, right? She's writing lyrics about being, quote, just a girl from Orange County, but she's walking red carpets with a silent entourage of Japanese dancers.
It's a huge contrast.
She essentially turned a living cultural aesthetic into a highly lucrative, glorified merchandise line.
It's a remarkably complicated legacy to untangle. On one side, you have critics who argue this is textbook appropriation, stripping the context away from a culture and turning it into a costume for a personal profit.
Right.
On the flip side, Gwen has consistently maintained that this comes from a place of deep, genuine admiration. That tension between her authentic garage band roots and her heavily curated, internationally borrowed aesthetic becomes the defining contradiction of her entire career.
And speaking of that tension between her authentic personal life and her curated public output, we have to look at what happens in the 2010s.
When the facade cracks.
Exactly. In 2002, she had married Gavin Rossdale, the frontman for the rock band Bush, and they had 3 sons together. But in 2015, she files for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences.
Yeah.
And this followed very public, highly damaging allegations of his extramarital affair with their nanny.
It's a devastating blow to her personal life, but structurally, history repeats itself here.
Just like with Tony Kanal.
Exactly. Just like that breakup decades earlier, this profound devastation forces her to strip away the artifice, leading to her most vulnerable work in years. In 2014, she had been working on a new album that she later admitted felt completely forced and inauthentic.
So she just scrapped it.
When her marriage collapses, she scraps that entire project. She needed an outlet for the pain, so she writes the 2016 album, This Is What the Truth Feels Like.
And she explicitly states that the album is focused on finding forgiveness rather than seeking revenge.
Which is a very mature approach.
Yeah. And once again, that raw vulnerability pays off. The public connects with the real Gwen. That record becomes her very first solo #1 album on the Billboard 200 chart.
When we look at the undeniable pattern in her life, we see that her most emotionally resonant and commercially successful eras are directly birthed from the ashes of her most painful personal upheavals.
That's like her superpower.
Yeah, the mechanism of her success relies on channeling her chaotic reality into her art in a way that deeply connects with audiences. She uses songwriting as a survival tool.
And right in the middle of all this personal upheaval, there's another massive shift. She joins the hit TV show The Voice as a coach.
Right.
And that is where she meets country star Blake Shelton. They end up collaborating on #1 country hits like Nobody But You and Happy Anywhere.
From ska to country.
Right. And they eventually marry on his Oklahoma ranch in 2021. I mean,
Yeah.
just track that evolution. She goes from an Orange County ska kid in a garage to an 80s-inspired pop solo star with a Japanese entourage to singing country music duets in Oklahoma.
She is the ultimate musical chameleon. She has this unparalleled ability to adapt to whatever environment she finds herself in.
Truly.
But her willingness to constantly shift her aesthetic and borrow so freely from different cultures brings us to the modern lens on her career. Because the scrutiny she faces today is far more intense than it was in 2004.
Yeah, we absolutely have to talk about the 2023 interview she did with Allure magazine because it set the internet on fire.
Oh, it really did.
She was asked to reflect on her Harajuku era given modern sensitivities. In defending it, Gwen explained that her father worked as a marketing executive for Yamaha, and he traveled frequently between California and Japan for 18 years.
Right. She said his stories made her a super fan of the culture.
Exactly. But then she famously stated in the interview, and this is a direct quote, "My God, I'm Japanese."
Yeah, that quote was everywhere.
And she also claimed in that exact same conversation that she identifies with the Hispanic and Latin communities of Anaheim where she grew up.
Following that interview, cultural critics and writers immediately pointed out the obvious. She is strictly of Irish and Italian-American descent.
Right.
Her comments led to incredibly strong accusations of cultural appropriation. The core argument from her critics is that claiming a racial or cultural identity based purely on fandom completely crosses the line from appreciation to appropriation. It minimizes the lived reality of those actual communities.
And that's not the only complexity we see when we look at her career through today's lens. This wasn't just an isolated incident.
No, it wasn't.
Back in 2012, No Doubt actually had to completely pull a music video for their song Looking Hot because they received widespread complaints that its Cowboys and Indians theme was deeply insensitive towards Native Americans.
I remember that.
And then more recently, her politics have come into question. She publicly praised an interview conducted by conservative pundit Tucker Carlson. She has also heavily promoted a Catholic prayer app called Hallow.
Right.
Critics and activists have strongly associated both of those things with right-wing, anti-abortion politics, and she has faced significant backlash for it.
But if we look at the full picture, her public identity refuses to be easily boxed in.
It's super complicated.
It is. Concurrently with those events, when she was asked in an interview how she would react if one of her sons came out as gay, she stated she would be, quote, blessed with a gay son. She emphasized that her only priority is that her boys are healthy and happy.
It's this wild, almost dizzying mix. She's a devout Catholic who promotes prayer apps, but she has deep, long-standing ties to the LGBTQ+ community.
Yeah.
And she has spent her entire life enthusiastically borrowing heavily from cultures outside her own.
This raises an important question, and it shows just how complex Gwen Stefani's public identity truly is. She operates in a highly polarized space where her personal beliefs, her artistic inspirations, and her massive business ventures frequently collide with modern cultural sensitivities.
Right.
It's crucial for us to understand how the public perception of her actions has shifted dramatically over the decades, even if her own internal justifications haven't changed.
Exactly. So let's bring this all back to where we started, to that central tension of Gwen Stefani.
Okay.
She is a musical chameleon who undeniably built an empire on raw authenticity. She bravely shared her deepest heartbreaks from Tony Kanal to Gavin Rossdale with the entire world.
Crying in her music videos, singing her literal diary pages.
Yeah, giving fans a front row seat to her pain. Yet, at the exact same time, her visual aesthetic has always relied heavily on putting on costumes, adopting highly curated personas, and freely taking elements from other cultures to build her brand.
It leaves us with a final, provocative thought to mull over.
What's that?
As the music industry becomes increasingly globalized, and as artists are subjected to far greater instantaneous scrutiny regarding cultural sensitivity and appropriation, will future pop stars ever be able to borrow as freely and unapologetically as Gwen did in 2004?
That's a great question.
Or has the era of the Harajuku Girls permanently closed in pop culture?
Something to think about for sure. Thanks for listening to Pippi Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.